Next, we're going to focus on parents. And when I started looking for someone to do the moderation for a parent panel, I started to look for companies that used AI in unique ways. And Lynn Perkins, the CEO and founder of UrbanSitter, is a mom, and she has taken her vision of open table for restaurants to babysitting. And if you're a parent, you know how important that is. Lynn?
Great, thank you everyone for being here. We're gonna spend a little time today talking about technology in the family healthcare space. And I'm thrilled to have three fantastic panelists here joining me today. So I'm gonna go ahead and let each of you talk about your businesses. And Iman, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Iman Farzaneh, I work for Philips. I run the mother and childcare business. In Philips, we focus on basically from the first scan to first steps of the baby. We try to basically enable a healthy start for a healthy future. That's what we are focusing.
And anything exciting that you have been focusing on here at CES? Any products that have drawn a lot of attention that you can?
Yeah, so the products from actually Jordan are quite interesting. So we were just talking about it. So the Owlet, I guess we're going to talk about it a little bit. So that has been actually the most interesting one that I've seen so far. To be very honest, I have been extremely busy, so I have blocked the whole day tomorrow to go around and look at the booth a little bit.
Great. And Manny, you want to talk about Tyto Care a little bit?
Yes, so my name is Manny Shipman. I work for Tyto Care, and we created a technology that allows essentially pushing primary care from the traditional clinical setting to the patient's home. And so we created a device and a platform that will allow, in the case of pediatrics, for a parent to examine their child, so do a heart and lung exam, do an ear exam, do a throat exam, submit the data to a physician for a review, and the physician can then decide whether they want to do a follow-up visit, prescribe medications, and so on. So essentially, it's an extension for a traditional virtual care technology, allowing conducting an actual physical exam, but at the patient home.
Great, thank you. And Jordan, I'd love to hear about Owlet, and maybe you can also talk about your new product that just came out.
Cool. My name is Jordan Monroe. I'm one of the co-founders at Owlet Baby Care. 3 years ago, we launched a little baby sock that gets a baby's heart rate and oxygen levels via a little red light. It's called pulse oximetry. It's the same thing you use in the hospital to the doctor to know when he should come and check in on you. We miniaturized it and put on a sock so that mom and dad can know when to come and check in on baby in the middle of the night. So. And we just here at the show announced a new pregnancy monitor. So it's a fabric band that you actually can't really tell there's sensors in it, but we're actually picking up ECG signals and listening to fetal heart rate, picking up fetal movement and contractions. So we're able to have a mom wear it at night, wake up in the morning and get a little report that says, baby looks great, keep enjoying your pregnancy. And then we can actually, notify if something's going outside of predetermined ranges. So the mission behind that product is really similar to the Smart Sock. We want parenting to be less stressful and more connective and engaging with our children. So,
thank you. Yeah, I think one of the connectors here is that each of the companies up here are addressing family care needs that are very relevant in each family's life for themselves and for their children. And on the note of your new product, I thought, Jordan, maybe we'd start with you in this question. How do you decide where to focus when you're looking at developing a new product or enhancing one that you have? I know one of the toughest things is figuring out how to prioritize. And what have you done in terms of figuring out what you're going to develop next? Do you have techniques that you use at the company?
I think it's really tempting especially to come to CES and you see things popping up and you're like, oh my goodness, like we should be there, because these guys are there, we should be doing it too. And we like to start with the problem first, and so we say, well, is that a really big problem? And I think an example is, anxiety and peace of mind during pregnancy. No one was really thinking about that 3 years ago when we said, this is painful, we wish it was better, how can we make it better? So that we really start with the problem first and then try to see what the solution is. Maybe not get too wrapped up in, is it AI or, maybe the solution or, the technological wave there, but focus on the problem and see if the technology can match it. So.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And Manny, maybe you can talk about, I know with Tyto Care, you started with a product that works with healthcare providers and healthcare networks, and this year you're coming out with your consumer product. How has your team decided where to focus their efforts, both in terms of either new product or enhancing existing product?
So I would agree with my colleague here. I think the idea came about of just understanding the problem and what is it that we're trying to solve. So for us it was why myself as a parent, if my child has an ear infection or if he just wakes up sick, why do I need to take them to the doctor to hear the same response all the time? So if I can do it from the convenience of my home, this is what we try to solve. So for us, the way we decided to prioritize is again set that goal as the shooting target, and then sort of take it and evolve the focus step by step. So initially we said, okay, so how do we develop a quality medical device, but then make it easy enough to use for a consumer, and also of course of having good quality. So that's one. Then next step, how do we actually engage consumers? And so it's sort of always a moving target. You always need to know how to say no to certain things as well, because there's a variety of things you discover along the way. And then as you get some market tractions, obviously get feedback from your customers, whether those are consumers or doctors, and you also need to decide how to fit those into your development process. And so it's sort of always rethinking, reprioritizing until you get to the spot you want to be at.
And how about at Philips Avent? Do you, both within each product line and then across the company as a whole, when you think about new products, how are priorities being established?
Yeah, so I pretty much echo what my colleagues here said. We start with the consumer, of course. It goes a little bit more than just understanding the problem. It's really a consumer journey, because how you address that is quite important. So it has to be a little bit like a lot more seamless, because the trend is also everything is personalized, everything is really, really tailored to your needs. And that's what we try to do. So we try to really get it to the next step in terms of a seamless experience. So how you address that, of course, technology is a big enabler, and we see it all over here. But consumers want it personalized. They really want to have a seamless experience. So if, for example, you just download our pregnancy app and we say, okay, you're pregnant, download the app, don't worry about anything. Your journey is going to be seamless, right? We partner up with professionals. We partner up with basically people who have the technology and provide and manage that ecosystem, basically. So we don't have to do everything ourselves, but we set the priorities in terms of consumer first, and then addressing that journey and making it as seamless as possible. And that's really setting the priority for us.
Great. One of the things I think that's interesting, all of your companies involve medical experts, technology experts, and other areas of expertise. And I think it'd be interesting for the audience to hear how you have these interdisciplinary talents that work together. And I think, why don't we start with you, Iman? As being at the biggest company here, I'd be really curious to understand how Philips Avent leverages scientists and medical research and the technology component and the product teams. How do the interdisciplinary areas work together?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So again, let me make it very easy and tangible, and maybe a small little story here. We start with the consumer. So we know, for example, 90% of the pregnant moms plan to breastfeed. So we know that, so based on all the insights and the studies that we have. And we know that 60% of that 90% in the first 10 days, they think that they're going to give up on it. They're not going to continue with that, right? And I'll get to your question. So we know that, that's an insight. So they end up, for whatever reasons, or with social, with psychological, or whatever, switching to bottle and breastfeeding at one point, because they have to go back to work or whatever. So we have to provide solutions for them that addresses their need of breastfeeding and bottle feeding. That means the bottle that we have to develop, for example, the teats, the nipple that we have to develop, it has to be physiology based. Why does it have to be physiology based? Because there is a nipple confusion. So if you breastfeed and bottle feed, right? You have to be compatible. So we have to work with scientists, with medical doctors, with engineers to develop that teat to reflect the physiology. So it goes as far as like scanning, ultrasounding the breastfeeding, and the bottle feeding next to each other and understand what's going on, truly understand what's going on. And then the engineers, of course, they need to develop it. And we have then to test it and clinically prove it, right? So there's a lot of science behind just that small little nipple or bottle that you see and you can purchase everywhere. But it goes way beyond that. So it's not that teat maybe is just a point solution. But imagine of the 5 senses, right? So when you're bonding with a baby when you are breastfeeding, right? When you're bottle feeding, you are not doing the same thing. So what we do, we go way beyond just that point solution and try to really enable that experience, right? So maybe the scent, maybe the heart rate, maybe the way the mom holds the baby. So that whole experience needs to be also reflected again. And that's, you have to work with a lot of scientists, a lot of medical doctors. You have to have a very deep understanding of what's going on in that journey and how the consumer gets to that journey, and then try to address that as seamless as possible.
And you, being in a larger company, you have teams within to do all these research studies. You have people within the Philips organization who can be on these research teams. I'd be interested to know, both with Owlet and Tyto Care, if you've taken feedback from some of your early partners too for data, or if it's all been studies that you've done internally. But so back to the question about interdisciplinary teams. So, for instance, Manny, how have you worked with both clinicians and technology experts?
Sure, and I think it's true for any organization, regardless, whether you need clinical expertise or not. You always have sort of sales and marketing pulling in one direction, regulatory folks pulling in another direction, technical folks, product folks. So they're all sort of stay within their comfort zones, build trenches, and I think for us, what worked is trying to get people wear different hats, as in try to understand, so an engineer trying to understand what goes through the mind of a regulatory person, having the clinical person understand what goes through the mind of a salesperson, and so creating effective communication channels between those teams so that they can share experiences, share priorities. This would allowed essentially our founder's dream to become a reality.
Yeah, for us, our customer is the end consumer. And so we're super focused around them. We engage on the doctors and research side early on to say, we want to do this in the future. How do we make sure that we can get there once we get it? We kind of verify with them, but then the research, we kind of bring it to the research and bring it to them once we've kind of got everything hammered out and we're ready to prove that it did what we intended to do. So we engage at the beginning and then show it off there at the end of the product cycle.
And circle back to it, yeah.
Yeah.
And are you using data, do you also use, and I guess this would actually probably be for both of your companies, do you use data from end users to actually improve? Are you using data that you've kind of amassed to drive product changes?
So for us, at least at this stage of the product, we collect massive amounts of data because those are all files of recordings of heart and lung sounds, video feeds. So what we do with the data, right now the product allows essentially or guides a lay user through how to conduct those exams. So all of the data we collect allows us to perfect those guidance algorithms so that each time a new patient does an exam, the guidance becomes more and more accurate. In the future, we're thinking through using this data for also some decision support capabilities for physicians, not for consumers, so that if the algorithms detect a certain problem within the diagnostic data, they can alert the physicians.
Yeah, data on our side is something we're super excited about because for those of you who know about the Apple smartwatch that just barely got ECG as a medical device, it wasn't the entire smartwatch, it was just the software application. That's what's the medical device. And that actually gets us pretty excited because we see all kinds of things in our data. You can spot it just by looking at a heart rate that goes like this and then flies up to 300 and sits up there. That's tachycardia for a baby. And there's deeper trends and things that we're interested in seeing and saying, when we're on a baby all night, here's all these different conditions that we might be able to see. Hopefully, study them, get them cleared, and then turn around and say, similar to how Apple's been able to say, here's a AFib medically cleared, AFib software we want to be able to do something similar down the road. And we're kind of in the early days of discovering that, but it's pretty exciting. We've seen these things for a while, and now Apple's kind of opened up a door to do some amazing stuff.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's started a company knows that user acquisition is one of the hardest things to come by. And I think if you're in an area where trust is of paramount importance, which it is with health and families and things like that, I think how you gain trust with users for acquisition is particularly important. I think it'd be great to understand how each of your companies have done that. And Manny, I wanted to start with you on this question because you have you're essentially revolutionizing the way that healthcare between a practitioner and a family occurs. So that's new in and of itself, and you have a new device that goes with it. So you've kind of got the double threshold there. How have you gone out establishing trust both in the medical community and, as you start to think about consumers, how are you thinking about that?
It's a great question. So for us, as you mentioned, there are two types of users that we're going after. On the one side, those are the clinicians. On the other side, those are the consumers. And so for us, the first thing that is a big advantage, of course, is the FDA. So it's a medical device. So having the FDA seal is already goes a long way. But then starting with the clinician, again, that's sort of a multi-tier approach of building the trust. At the first touch with the physician, the first thing is sort of they see the device, they get the impression of the device. What was important for us is to create high quality, high impact technology. So the first time the physician interacts and sort of put their earphones on and listen to our hearts as we're demonstrating the technology, so that's the first wow factor. And wow, that's great technology. And then the next question is, okay, so who's using it? So for us, it was making sure we conduct clinical studies with major hospitals, so that now, and it's all about data, right? So now we can show, okay, so it was used in this hospital. This is the data that this is how it compares to existing devices. This is how much more they were able to diagnose using our technology. So having both data and sort of reputable doctors producing clinical study data goes a long way of creating that trust with physicians. And then, of course, like with every new technology, even though you have clinical studies out there, they first start small. They try the technology themselves on a small subset of patients, and then this is how they go to phase 2, 3, and 4, and go to sort of the wide mass consumer populations. And for the consumers, it's kind of the FDA again. It's a big thing. So knowing that now you have an FDA-cleared device. It's super important, but the way we chose to build trust with the consumers, us being a small brand, unlike Philips, for example, where there's not much brand awareness in the marketplace, the way we chose to commercialize our technology, as opposed to going directly to consumers from day zero, we decided to actually sort of take the B2B2C strategy, where we started working with large health systems, brand name in healthcare, where people living in a certain geography, certain area know who they are, and so we commercialize the technology through them. So essentially we go to a health system, and then in turn they offer the technology to the consumer. And now when it comes not from Tyto Care but from a Cleveland or a CHOP, for example. So
that's interesting. That's very similar actually to UrbanSitter. We do the same thing where when you're looking for a childcare provider in a new market, if you don't know the UrbanSitter brand, what you're actually seeing is 6 parents from your neighborhood have hired this sitter, 5 parents from your school. We borrowed trust from other trusted organizations. I think it's a smart way to do it. How about for a big company like Philips? You roll out a new product. You've got the big brand behind you, but you're still looking for market share. How have you found that user acquisition works best?
Yeah, so I think on the consumer side, of course, right? The trust is a big word that needs to be addressed. And from my point of view, I'm an engineer, so I'm very analytical about breaking the trust into 3 factors, right? It's about credibility, it's about reliability, and it's about intimacy. So as Philips, of course, you have the brand, you have the 130 years experience of bringing medical equipment and being a reliable brand out there. So that's your first touch point with the consumers. But the reliability is very important because consumers set reference points. As they use your product, as they experience your solution, they set those reference points and they refer always back to it. So you have to be reliable in what you bring and what you offer. And then the intimacy is very, very important, and that's exactly what you said in terms of it's always a two-way communication. So you have to make sure that you are not alone. So you are not talking to an app, and you have to give that personal touch. So user-generated content is very important. Ratings and reviews are very important. The bloggers, how people talk about it, word of mouth, those elements are all very important, but those three aspects behind trust, those credibility, reliability, and intimacy, that's where we need to address, and that's what we try to be best at, basically.
How about Jordan, for you? You've got a brand new product out there.
Yeah.
You're going to hit the ground running. How are you going to gain user trust on this one?
Yeah, I was thinking about the original question you asked, so I'll answer that. But our biggest marketing tool is product. Mm-hmm. I was thinking this morning and I actually made a little list. There's been 12 people from the time that we started that tried to solve a very similar problem, and all but 2 of them that announced here at CES this year have gone away. And I really think it comes down to having the right solution that is, you're maniacal about that user experience, and then you're also using a technology or using something that people really believe in. And so to us, it's our sales team is like, this is the easiest place I've worked, because the product is just really, really good, and that's just a major focus for us. So.
It's interesting too. You're also hitting on both of your products hit on a pain point for the parent or parent-to-be in terms of stress. So it's nothing like solving one of the bigger stress items as well to help gain
product market fit,
share.
and then executing well on it,
I want to switch from kind of how you get users to actually not only how do you keep them, but how do you make them advocates and keep them engaged. And when we were doing a prep call for this, one of the things I thought was really interesting, Iman was talking about the online communities that they've built at Philips Avent around both different products, but also around like different family concerns and health issues. And I would love it if you could kick off our engagement portion of this by talking a little bit about the communities that your organization has built.
Yeah, so we have this app. Some of you may be using it. It's called Pregnancy Plus. So we acquired this company called Health and Parenting about 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, and we have 21 million downloads. We have 4 million monthly active users, 1 million daily active users on that platform. So of course, these people, these 1 million active users, they log in multiple times a day, and they spend quite a few minutes on that app every day. So that means they are extremely engaged. So pregnant moms are very, very engaged. They are hungry for content. They are hungry for education. So the key is, of course, the content. So the content is king. So in an app, to keep the consumers engaged and make them come back, that's the content. That's where we bring in all our professional and consumer expertise into that and make it really relevant for the consumer. And it's really, again, personalized. So that means your daily page is tailored for you based on your needs, right? So it's literally designed around you at that time in your pregnancy, what you need. So that content is very, very relevant for you. Of course, we know all the tricks, like how often do you need to track something so it becomes a habit, and then you come back to it and you use that certain tracker or you use certain tools. So all that is, of course, built into the app, and there are tools and features. It's highly engaging, but behind that is really the content. So the content is the key. So as Jordan says, product is the key. So that product, that key factor that makes people come back again and again, is really the content of it.
And you obviously track that engagement closely. And
oh yeah, of course. Yeah. We have tons of data, and we generate every day more data.
And Manny, I think it's interesting because through your product and even the remote service in and of itself, I think engagement will become core to the experience, because it is that relationship between the doctor and the patient. What else are you doing when you think about community?
So for us, it's a bit more challenging because the nature of the device is that it's being used episodically. So it's being used only when your child is sick, right? Otherwise, it's sort of in the medicine cabinet, and it's gathering dust particles. As we started with sort of the B2B to C strategy, we didn't engagement at that stage was less important because it was truly a medical tool where a parent would use it only when the child is sick. Now as we are going sort of the more direct-to-consumer stage of our company, it's done through combination of product and marketing. So what we did in our December upgrade to the device and software is essentially created a set of features that would generate that engagement. So one is, as soon as you unbox the device, there is a new feature that's called a Tyto Academy, which essentially puts the device in the practice mode and allows the entire family, parents will engage the kids and vice versa, essentially play with the device, train themselves with the device so they will become used to it, know how to use it even before they call the physician for the first time. So that's sort of the onboarding experience. And then it becomes more of a sort of a household, I wouldn't want to say toy because it's a medical device, but it does allow periodically parents to play with the kids and really create sort of a gaming/sharing experience. And in addition, we also created some sort of social sharing features where you can share the data that you collect with your care circle, right? Whether it's your pediatrician, even if they're not using Tyto, you can share it with them. If you have additional caregivers, you can share the data with the caregivers. And then also through smart marketing as well, right? So for example, if it's a flu season, you want to remind parents that you have this device, and if your child has a fever or cough, you can use the device to connect to your doctor.
Oh, interesting. That's there's a lot of incentive there on the practitioner side. Interesting. And Jordan, how about at Owlet?
Again, building the best product you can. This one's outside of kind of our wheelhouse a little bit as far as creating a community, and so
in terms of
we leave it
engagement,
to
you must have stats, like you must know on the engagement side, like if you get somebody to a certain number of uses with it, obviously do you kind of track like, hey, if we can get you to use it for 3 nights, we know you're hooked, or if we can get you to use it, do you guys look at those kind of metrics?
We've definitely got abandonment rates and kind of those. For us, it's actually more, I give it the analogy of a human engagement, like you decide if you like someone in the first 7 seconds, right? So very similarly, they decide if they love you or hate you, like right at setup. So it starts at opening the box, it starts at powering on the device, and just those first few steps, getting it connected to Wi-Fi. If you can't get it connected, sorry, I do not like you. And so those initial steps really matter, and the first night matters. We actually see that if you rate us, a high NPS at day 3, it's not going to change all the way to day 30. So those first few days really, really matter. So yeah.
It's the same way at UrbanSitter. We know if you reach out to a second sitter within a period of time that you're then hooked. And I was thinking about on the practitioner side and what you do at Tyto Care, because we have a very active sitter Facebook group, and we kind of took a risk when we put it out there in terms of, are you going to have sitters that are not content with parts of your product or your service or whatever it might be? But it's actually ended up being like one of our biggest retention tools, because sitters will give each other advice and stuff in there. And I think building community can actually have a good kind of a good impact on retention overall. It's interesting. I think as a category, all 3 of you are making accessible to families products that wouldn't have existed 5 years ago, in some cases 2 years ago. And so how do you think about both technology improving accessibility, and are there things that you're doing right now or that you're hoping to do in the next 6 months that you can imagine will even increase accessibility even more? And this could be anything through company-wide initiatives or things that you're doing specifically with one component of technology to really increase accessibility to families.
So, the way at least I think about accessibility, there are 2 parts of it. Sort of one is there are those of us who are lucky that have access to care on a daily basis. So if I want to take my child to be a pediatrician tomorrow, I can. And so for folks like me, Tyto Care becomes a convenience tool. So it's more a convenient side of care, right? So instead of taking my 2 kids and going to the pediatrician in the morning, if one of them is sick, and I know because I visited the clinic, the second one is probably will get sick as well. So now I can do the exam from the convenience of my home and don't have to cancel my morning appointments. So all of that, it's a convenience factor. But what at least makes me happy coming to work every day is when we create true access to care. And so if we think about about our devices being placed at schools, at community centers in rural America, in places like Canada, where folks have to drive 2-3 hours to see a physician, where in order to see a specialist, you need to get in line and wait for months in many cases, where devices such as Tyto, and specifically Tyto, placed in those settings can create true access to care. And we're lucky that we have a lot of partners on the healthcare side, so children's hospitals, providers that are willing to extend and working hard to extend that accessibility to those areas where access to care is either non-existent or difficult. And if we can become an enabler to that, that's what makes me come out to work every day.
It's really exciting, yeah. How about you? How do you think about accessibility?
Yeah, it's extremely similar, just a little bit of a different, let's say, different space. So we just announced a partnership with BabyScript. That's remote monitoring of pregnant women, and they don't need actually to do their 14 visits to their gynecologist or OBGYN, but they can be actually, they have access to doctor via telehealth and via basically even coaches, and they can stay home. Basically the vital signs are being monitored, the weight, the blood pressure is being monitored, and only if they are at risk or only if there is a pattern recognized, then they are called to come in, or they can connect via telehealth, which is embedded in the app.
Interesting.
They can connect with their doctor. It's reimbursed in many cases by the insurance or by the hospital, and that's accessibility, and that's better outcomes with a lot less cost, basically. And if we manage that, that's a global trend, and it's not only in the U.S. Globally, you see the healthcare cost exploding, and it's really a sick care and not a health care. So what we are trying to do is to make it personal and personalize the solution, make it accessible and affordable, basically, via these type of putting these ecosystems together and partnering up with the right partners. And that's something that we will continue to do, and we are actually in the forefront in many spaces in the health technology area, basically, as well.
That's great. And Jordan, for both of your products, I think there's a lot of accessibility there, and also I think about the non-accessibility as well, in terms of people who wouldn't otherwise be able to make it into. You've got the same kind of factor going on where you're saving people from potentially trips to the doctor and things like that, and then for those who wouldn't have it, you're giving them the access to that kind of technology. How do you think about accessibility?
Accessibility is probably something we're constantly thinking about. We really believe at our core that, and the analogy we use is the car seat. From the time the car seat was invented, 7 years later, it was made a law in every single state that you could not leave the hospital without a car seat. And many of you know who have children, we just had our second, or when we had our second, the nurse walked us out to our car. I'm like, I've got a 2-year-old right here. What do you mean? I know how to do this, but we take it so important and so seriously. We think that accidents in the home and just monitoring at home is just as important, and if not more. And so we feel that within 5 to 10 years, the home monitoring of vital signs will be universal. It'll be just like the car seat that you have to take it home. So we think through, and that's like at our core what we believe. And so we're constantly thinking of the corner cases that we have to be able to work on and to provide for different customers. So one example is I forget what it's called, but there's a percent of babies we just don't work on because their perfusion level isn't very well. Their blood doesn't make it to the extremities as well as maybe an average person, and so our device is just really clunky experience. And so future versions, we're always doing research. Well, how can we get to work on better and better perfusion levels? And so accessibility is something we're kind of constantly thinking about because that's our long-term vision. So.
That's great. I want to make you guys accessible to the audience, so I thought I would open it up. We have a few minutes left to open it up to 1 or 2 questions. Does anyone have any questions for the panelists? I know I think we have a microphone out there too, or I can repeat them. Any questions? If not, I have a final question.
Any questions? No questions?
I've got one more in case, well, people raise your hand if you have one, but I'm gonna go ahead and ask another one. On the innovation front, are there innovations that you're willing to share with the group that you're excited about, either personally or professionally, that you think will get integrated into the family, like wealth and technology space? Are there things that you're either eyeing individually or your companies are excited about integrating down the road?
I'm excited about what Philips is doing with baby scripts. I think that is super awesome. I went with my wife to all of our OB appointments with our most recent baby, and it's like mind-blowing. It's 2018, and you drive 30 minutes to go just sit there, and they check your weight, check your blood pressure, and send you back home. I mean, you have a quick chat. I mean, it's like really excited to see that innovation. On our side, we want to build a kind of a connected experience, and so we feel there's a lot of different products in the nursery that just make sense to be integrated on our platform. That if you could imagine that you unplug the smart sock and it says, okay, we know baby's getting ready for bed, so we get the room ready. Maybe we'll adjust the temperature and adjust the lighting and turn on a sound machine and humidifier, and maybe there's a handful of things that can click on as soon as you unplug that sock. And when you plug it back in, maybe there's a handful of things that can adjust as well. But a connected nursery is something that's of interest to us. My last one that is like my personal is, again, coming to the first comment on how we think of where to go next. I think one of the biggest pains that no one is solving is sleep. Again, now it's 2019 and we still sleep as poorly as we did probably 100,000 years ago when babies were being born. It's still just, you're being woken up every few hours, and there's got to be a better way to go about that. And so that's something that's on our minds a lot right now. So,
listen, as somebody with 3 kids, I would not oppose to that. So
yeah.
I would have loved that. Manny, how about you at Tyto Care?
So for us, we're constantly looking for new diagnostic technologies that can be extended to the home. So one of the things we're looking for at this time is there are, as opposed to just devices, there are home diagnosis kits that can look in your urine, can look in your blood, strep, throat. So there are different technologies out there that are just emerging to do, and the extra step that will prevent that trip to the doctors, because for these exams right now, you do need to go to the doctor's office. So if we can extend our capabilities into those diagnostic areas and truly bring some of these capabilities to the home, this is what we're looking at right now.
That's great. And Iman, let's wrap it up with you. What are you either personally or professionally excited about on the innovation side?
Yeah, well, Jordan, it's mutual. I'm super excited about what Owlet is doing. So I think there is an opportunity for partnering up. I'm not going to disclose much around sleep because that's still confidential. But what I'm kind of excited about is we have developed and actually introduced this smart bottle concept a couple of years ago. Actually, last year we introduced that here, where you can measure quantitative feeding, so the frequency of the feed, the amount of the feed, who has fed the baby, how long, etc. But now we see that with that same device, we can actually make, based on the data that we have and based on the number of researches that we have done, we can actually make qualitative statements around the feed, which is great, because then you can relate to baby, how the baby slept, and was it really baby was playing with the bottle, or was it really drinking? And then a number of implications that comes out of that, basically. So it's not just quantitative feeding, but it's really you make statements around how good that feed was, and that's really opens another world completely for us.
It's true. I mean, we've talked a lot about accessibility, but if the quality in all of these areas of innovation, if with accessibility comes increase in quality, it's a win-win for everybody. Thank you, the three of you. It's been an honor to be able to be your moderator. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Let's hear it for our panelists.